The Dingers podcast is on the air. This is Mitch, and I'm here with Jeff. This is episode 106. How are you doing tonight, Jeffrey?
Oh, not too bad. I mean, it was a really great day here in Iowa. It was above 50. That's
It
always nice
was
to see in February,
tank top and short weather.
Yeah, it is. So, I don't know how you been.
Not too bad, not too bad. Just trying to get through the school year. This is like the dog days. Like, there's no break in teaching from like January through March. They're like no days off. There's no holidays. There's nothing. It's just a grind. And so just trying to make it through, man. Just trying to make it through. But do you have an update? Like, you've been doing the You Can't Fix Stupid little news clips, and you gave us one about somebody that showed up in a funeral home that was alive.
Yes. So, the funeral home was fined, I think, $10,000. And as I was reading the article, the person that opened the body bag, so inside the body bag, this woman was in another cloth bag. They noticed that it was rising and falling, and as soon as they opened that one, the woman gasped for breath. How freaky would that be?
I mean, you're getting into to be in the funeral home business,
right?
You're working with the dead, but you aren't expecting a live person,
right? You go to the bar after work, and someone says, "Hey, how's your day?" Well, I thought I was going to tend to somebody that had recently passed, but yet no, they were fighting for their last breath inside a Ziploc bag. That'd be terrible. So then also, our senator here in Iowa is asking for
Chuck Grassley.
Yep, Chuck Grassley. He pens a letter to the state after the woman was mistakenly declared dead. He wants some answers. How does this happen?
I want some answers. We want some answers that night on the podcast. We want answers.
Right? At least he's looking out for people his own age.
Yeah.
So, in other unrelated news to funeral homes and people showing up dead, there was the ISU men's lacrosse team seemed to have gotten into some trouble out in Denver.
So yeah, I heard about this. One, I didn't even know that Iowa State had a lacrosse team for one.
I thought that was one of the sports that got cut like a long time ago with like men's baseball. I didn't either until I read this article. So they lost their vehicle privileges, so like they cannot go to away games. So somebody snapped this picture of the ISU vehicle outside of this marijuana dispensary. Now, the players claim that they were not inside the medical dispensary, which I know is horseshit. They're college kids. They're under no adult supervision. They're in Colorado. They're eating, smoking, doing whatever. There's just one simple way to figure out if they went in there or not, and that's a drug test. That'll solve a lot of problems.
Definitely.
So if they weren't in the dispensary, I'd like to know what Mexican restaurant they were in. And I tell you what, I was once a 21, 22-year-old college kid. I know exactly what I was doing.
I mean, I like that they tried to say, but we were at a restaurant nearby, because that'd be my go-to, right? Like deny. I've worked with enough youthful kids to know, but I mean, they were caught high and dry, literally high,
literally.
And for one, when I first read the article, I was like, I never knew that Iowa State had a lacrosse team. But then I went and looked up their record.
Are they terrible?
Oh, they are really terrible. And I should have brought it up because, like, in 2022, I think they were 0-6 to start the season. And their best player, I mean, if you were to have a poster child of a person that would maybe stop at a dispensary, he looked like a dude that would head up. And probably now, I'm guessing, he probably is the grad assistant coach. And he's probably the guy that was driving the vehicle for Iowa State that, hey, I need to make a pickup here.
When in Rome.
When in Rome, you stop and you do. Yeah. So I'm kind of just putting the puzzle pieces together. And
yeah.
So, but I think it's funny. I think it's funny that somebody would stop and take a picture of them. And and that dispensary looks, I mean,
janky, but then again,
very janky.
Isn't any dispensary janky?
Yep. Jeff, are you a coffee drinker?
Yes. During the cold weather months of the year, I do enjoy a nice piping cup of hot Joe.
Well, if you're tired of striking out with your coffee that you get, well, you can hit a home run with Connect Roasters Coffee Company Home Run Club. So the Dingers podcast is teaming up with Connect Roasters to host a monthly giveaway for exclusive Home Run Club members. So join the Home Run Club because it's great. You know why it's great? Because you get $1 back for every dinger that Ian Happ hits, called Dinger Dollars. And for every home run that the Cubs hit at home, you get a Dinger Dollar to put towards buying more coffee or other merchandise like Ian Happ Makes Me Coffee mug. Join the Home Run Club and receive a monthly delivery of the finest freshly roasted coffee beans straight to your doorstep every month. You'll be a MVP for your morning with every sip of the smooth and bold blends. So join the Home Run Club. Use code DingersPod. So go to homerunclub.coffee or just go to Connect Roasters and join their Home Run Club. You can select what coffee you want. Use promo code DingersPod and you'll be entered in. So every month you'll get an email. This next week, you should be getting email. If you're part of the Home Run Club, you're going to be getting an email and you can fill out a form, a Google form, which will ask you maybe how you make your coffee. What's the favorite type of roast that you do? What's the favorite blend that you like? What type of, do you like a pour over? What do you like? You fill out that form, you'll be entered in for a drawing for exclusive things. The first prize is pretty sweet. Possibly down the road, maybe Cubs tickets, maybe some signed baseballs by some Cubs players. I don't know. We might get crazy, but I know the first one is going to be a lot of fun, sweet giveaway. But if you're part of the Home Run Club, you should be getting an email this week. Fill it out. And then all you have to do is listen to the Dingers podcast because the first episode of the month will be announcing the winner. So join the Home Run Club with Connect Roasters. Use code DingersPod and fill out the form to win some really cool content and really cool prizes.
Well, I'd just like to add that, tomorrow is Valentine's Day. So if we have any female fans out there with a significant other, why don't you get your dollars out and get your significant other the gift that keeps on giving all year long? A subscription to the Connect Roasters Club of the Month.
Yep. Home Run Club. Do it. Well, tonight Jeff and I are actually going to step away and we're going to play for you interview that Jake had with Greg Huss. Great article or great interview with Jake and Greg. Greg does Northside Bound. He also does the Cubs on Deck podcast. But man, if you want to listen to somebody talk about prospects, he's your man. Like he is my go-to guy when I want to look up something for a Cubs prospect and how they're doing. He does a great job giving you insight throughout the whole season from the low level A all the way to AAA Iowa. And we have so much to be excited about with the Cubs prospects that we have. He's your man. And so we're going to play that interview. That'll do it for us for the rest of the episode. So you can enjoy listening to Jake and Greg. Just sit back and enjoy this interview.
All right. I am here with a guy that I've been listening to for years, been tweeting back and forth with for probably about 3 years as well. And I just realized in this is our first time actually recording anything together. It is none other than the Greg Huss. Greg, how are you doing, man?
The putting "the" in front of my name brings a lot more pressure. I don't know. I'm doing good, man. I appreciate you having me on. I'm excited to chat with you. Yeah, it's a long time coming, I guess. I was on with Mitch and had a great time with Mitch before, but I'm glad to be chatting with you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to have you. I think the guys would agree that I'm kind of like the minor league prospect minded guy of the Dingers crew. So it's good that, like, we get to chat about it. Obviously, like, I'm really into just minor league baseball in general. I don't really watch like you guys do, but just like reading about it, digesting it and everything, just the entire league, I'm trying to keep up on prospects around baseball. It's a lot of fun. It adds a whole other dimension to baseball fandom. But for our fans out there, I'm sure most of you listening know who Greg is. If you don't, Greg, hopefully you listened to Growing Cubs. It was one of my favorite podcasts. Shout out to Jimmy as well. And then while Growing Cubs was on, you guys launched North Side Bound with yourself, Greg Zumak, and Todd Johnson. And now, starting in November, you started a new podcast with Cubs on Deck. So since we're in an audio medium, let's start with that, man. You picked up right where you left off with Growing Cubs. Tell us a little bit about Cubs on Deck and what listeners can expect.
Yeah, really, with Cubs on Deck. So anybody out there that was listening to Growing Cubs that has not yet listened to Cubs on Deck, it's very similar in what we're doing, right? We're just talking about Cubs prospects. A lot of information and on all guys, right? Top prospects, lower tiered guys, just everybody in the Cubs system we're talking about. So I'm one of the hosts with Brian Smith is one of my hosts from Bleacher Nation, and then Greg Zumak, my partner over at Northside Bound. We're kind of I'm on every show, and then I kind of rotate back and forth between those guys as co-hosts. And in the off season, we've been recording every other week and throwing a couple interviews in there in the mix with some players. But once the season starts to kick off, I think starting in March, we're going to be recording episodes once every single week, episodes every Tuesday, listening for you guys' ears out there. And like I said, it's just all prospect content all the time. It's what I'm doing with my writing at Northside Bound. It's what I'm doing with my podcasting over at Cubs on Deck. Having a really good time. You can find that anywhere where you listen to podcasts, anywhere where you're listening to Dingers. You can find Cubs on Deck. We're on YouTube, all that good stuff. So I have a lot of fun with it, man.
Yeah, dude, it's a great listen, and having Zumak and Brian in the mix too. Like, I wrote in the show notes here, like, I think you three are the best Cubs prospect minds that I know of in one place. So to get to hear you guys kind of wax poetic about, and I think you guys all have like very specific things that you look at in prospects. Like, you kind of have your specialties right in the prospect mix. Like, on not the most recent episode, I think it was post CubsCon. Zumak talked a little bit about like college, or like, you know, like this upcoming draft, and, talking about like what college teams to watch out, and like players. You asked him what players we could watch for, like on ESPN Plus or something, who's going to be televised. And that was really interesting because, like, you don't really realize it as an MLB fan, but like college baseball is like almost here, right?
It's fun, man. Yeah, it's like starting now. Yeah, it's like basically starting now. And yeah, I have been very careful to surround myself with guys that know more than me, and that makes me look smarter. So I mean, like, when you're co-hosting with Brian Smith, who, like, Brian is one of, like, not only the best in terms of like Cubs prospect followers and content creators, but Brian is one of the best in all of minor league baseball coverage. Like, Brian is terrific. And then, so having him on board with the podcast, and having Zumak, who is the draft guru, like, he knows everything there is to know about the draft. I have honestly, like, since like working with him, I've backed off my coverage a little bit of the draft, just because I know I'm not doing it better than Zumak for one, and two, that like he just kind of feeds me all this information, and I'm able to kind of absorb that. And having him on the podcast, I'm really excited to have him on the podcast come middle of summer when we're diving deep into draft stuff. But yeah, man, it's a good time. I've enjoyed launching that, like you said, in November, and then kind of keeping things rolling over at Northside Bound, which is a lot of fun too.
Yeah. I mean, I want to talk about Northside Bound, and I think, we're going to talk about your new metric. But before we do, I I want to talk about the Jordan Wicks and Cole Roederer interviews, because I know that you guys, I'll start with Roederer because that's the most recent episode. And I just think that like he is the easiest dude to root for. Like he just seems like such a down-to-earth kid. I remember when you guys interviewed him, what was that, like maybe 2021?
Yeah, it would have been
like spring of 2021, maybe.
Probably leading into the 21 season. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Because it was really interesting to hear like the maturity level difference.
Oh my God.
Like it's obviously the same dude, but like he's more experienced. Obviously, he's playing in Australia right now, so he's traveled. He's got a different worldview. And man, from listening to the first interview, I was like, there is probably no one aside from, okay, I'll say like I love Cam Sanders because I love his attitude on the mound, but like there's probably no one in this system who like, maybe I shouldn't feel this way, but I kind of feel like Roederer is a little bit of an underdog, like because of 2020, because of injuries. He kind of talked about it too, like being viewed as the underdog and like wanting to prove people wrong in the interview, but like he's so easy to root for, and I just want that dude to be like so successful. So what did you take out of that interview? Like what was the highlight of that interview for you?
Yep. I said it when we posted that episode, that when I sat down and created Cubs on Deck and I was thinking about what players to get on first for interviews, Cole was the very first guy I thought of to get on the show. And I've had plenty of good experiences with a ton of awesome prospects. Awesome. I mean, that's a trend in the Cubs system. I know we talk about it a lot, but like a bunch of really good dudes. But
yeah,
I thought about Cole first because like he just exudes this energy that is like, it's so contagious and it just makes you so hyped for the watching minor league baseball and watching baseball in general. Like you want to get out there and play. Like I joke around a lot about like watching Nico Horner and Dansby Swanson play. And it's like, I want to get back out on the field. I want to relive the glory days a little bit. But like even listening to Cole Roederer speak about baseball, I feel that way, which is wild.
Yeah, dude, I felt the same way listening to the interview.
Yeah, dude, he's like, and you're spot on. Like I told him during the interview, I was like, it just feels like he's a different guy. I mean, he's the same like exciting player, exciting like human being. But from when I talked to him a couple of years ago to when I talked to him this winter, it's just like so much more mature, so much more like he has so much more knowledge of like what the way he goes about training, the way he goes about developing as a player and as a person. And I can't say enough good things about Cole Roederer. I'm really excited to see it. He had a couple of lost years in there, right? He had the Tommy John surgery. He lost it, which is weird from an outfielder, right? He lost the COVID year, stuff like that. But I'm excited for him to kind of break out probably in Tennessee this year to start 2023 and see what he does, because I'm rooting so, and that's something I don't ever try to hide the fact that I'm a fan. I'm a Cubs fan, and I'm a fan of all these players, and obviously I'm trying to deliver as much like good and quality information to fans so that they don't need to watch all these games. Like I don't, like you mentioned how like you're not necessarily watching every single one of these like minor league games, but like I wanted to make it so like you don't have to, you just get that knowledge and like you don't have to do that. But I want to deliver that information while also like I'm not like apologizing for the fact that I'm rooting for Cole Roederer. I want him to do well, whether it's with the Cubs or with a different organization. I just want him to succeed at the big league level because he deserves it.
Yeah, no, and I think that you like following your coverage via podcast or Northside Bound, it does fill in the gap. Like it does make it so that I feel okay like not watching every minor league game, because the coverage that you guys do is so in depth and like tells a story that fans, it makes the pertinent points, right? Like you guys in the Jordan Wicks interview, you got him to talk about how he just like didn't throw the changeup last year, and because he was working on the breaking stuff, and like that's become a talking point. Like I think I was listening to CHGO, and I think they mentioned that. I know you've been on their podcast too, but I think that like was a big talking point for them, and now that's something that's like you're bringing that into the forefront of like, hey, these minor league guys, like don't be appalled if you see like out their numbers because they're working on specific things. And that's it. Like you told that story through that Wicks interview super well.
Yeah, it's so important to like when we talk about development not being linear for players in general, like it is so much more than that. Like it's you can't necessarily just go like I mean when I first got into this, right? Like I got into this I was early on in college. I mean, so we're looking at like it was almost 10 years ago at this point. And when I got into this, I was scouting stat lines. Like I was looking at box scores. I was saying, oh, like this guy's going to be a good major leaguer because he was a 24-year-old dominating in low A. And it's like I didn't know, I didn't know when I started this, but like there is just so much that goes into it. And it's just it's fun to kind of try to relay that information to fans because they need to know. So they're not falling into the trap of me really loving Chesney Young 8 years ago and thinking he was the next big leaguer,
Yeah. And I mean, so like you kind of created a fail safe this offseason to try to pump the brakes of fans like you and I 10 years ago reading those minor league stat lines with this new metric that you created in BASH. So BASH stands for ballpark adjusted standardized hitting. Can you kind of like break, like, I don't even know where to start with it because I think dude, it really is an intuitive stat. And for someone who loves the minor leagues as much as I do, like the ballpark adjustment, like the way that you break it down on North Side Bound, like is really, really easy for people to understand. But can you just kind of like talk about what your goal was and then your process of even creating a metric like this?
Yeah, I'll lead off by saying this is like the nerdiest thing I've ever done in my entire life. Like I'm not
I love
even
it,
like
man. I'm here for it.
I'm not even a big like my career is like has nothing to do with like stats or like digging in like
what is your day job?
I work as like an urban planner.
Okay.
Like I work at like an architecture firm as an urban planner.
So like doing a little bit of number stuff.
I steer away from the engineering and stuff, so I don't have to do numbers. But so basically, as I was looking at the way that people were talking about prospects and the way that I've tried to like contextualize what a player is doing at a certain level or at a certain ballpark or in a certain league or at a certain age, I was like, there's gotta be some way to like make it all make sense in a number. And I know that like weighted runs created plus WRC plus is something that people reference a ton and rightfully so, because the people at Fangraphs have put that together and took years to like really perfect that and make it right. And it's a great stat. Like, so I'm me creating BASH is not to take away from that at all. But basically what I wanted to do was take into account the who a prospect is and not just say like scout his like stat line, like I was saying, like make it make sense. So basically what I did was I took numbers from this past season. I started with numbers from this past season in terms of just like raw offensive numbers, players, the singles and doubles and triples and home runs they're hitting and stolen bases. I'll get into that a little bit later, but and assign run values, a lot like what WOBA does or like what WRC Plus does. You get run values for those different ways of producing in your at-bats, right? And so ultimately what I did was I wanted to adjust this number so that it accounts for the league that you're playing in, which is what WRC Plus does right now, adjust for the league you're playing in. So the Carolina League, where Myrtle Beach plays, offensively, they just don't put as good offensive production as someone in AAA Iowa in the Pacific Coast, or not the Pacific Coast League, sorry, the International League. And so different leagues produce at different levels. We saw like that's pretty much common practice at this point, right? That's how you're able to compare what a major leaguer did this past year in 2022 with what an OPS, league average OPS like 700 or so, like a really, really low league average OPS compared to like when guys were juicing and hitting homers in 1998. You know what I mean? It's how you can compare those league rates. So I started with that, which is something that already isn't taken into account. But my first like mission here was to accommodate for ballpark adjustments. That is not something, which is kind of crazy enough that WRC Plus at Fangraphs, they do not do that. Neither does OPS Plus at Baseball Reference. Like they don't account for ballpark adjustments. And we know for a fact, based on Baseball America produces every single year those ballpark factors, we know that it is impossible to hit at Myrtle Beach, not because of the league, but because of the league, but also because of the ballpark. They're not too far from the ocean. The wind is always blowing in. It's just a cavernous ballpark. It's a pitcher's ballpark through and through.
Yeah.
And so because Kevin Alcantara played the entire year last year at Myrtle Beach, he played half of his games at Ticket Return Field in Myrtle Beach. What he did was far more impressive than what like his WRC plus is accounting for. Same for James Triantos, who didn't put up great numbers when you first look at them, but it's like he's performing at Myrtle Beach. It's tough to hit there. So that was kind of the second thing. And then one of the big things I took into account was age factor, right?
That's my favorite. That's my favorite thing to take into account because it's so important and it's talked about on like prospecting pods, but like I don't think that the general fan like really thinks about age correlated to the level they're playing at.
I think it is the easiest like mistake to make when you're just like a casual fan looking at the numbers that a prospect produces in the minor leagues. You look at James Triantos, again, was very young for his league compared to his league average. Basically, I took the age that every player was at their affiliate and compared it to the league average hitter age. So compared that to his peers. And then so if you're younger than league average, then you get a little boost in your offensive, in your bash because you're younger than league average. If you're way over league average, then you're getting knocked a little bit. So I'm coming out with an article over by the time this actually posts, I might already have it out over at Northside Bound that kind of looks into specific players and why they rank in terms of bash where they do, right? So James Triantos, young for his level, gets a boost. Kevin Alcantara gets a boost. Owen Casey was young for his level at high A. He gets a boost. Kevin Madej is a really good example of someone that did not perform very well offensively last year. You look at his slash line, not really pretty, but he was very young for his level in South Bend last year. Then on the other side of the spectrum, you got guys like Jake Slaughter
I was going to bring up Slaughter. Yeah.
He was playing at like in high A and he was playing in double A. And both of those affiliates, he was older, like significantly older than league average. At South Bend, he was 4 years older than the average player there. Plus, he didn't perform very well anyways there at South Bend. But then he got up to double A Tennessee. He started dominating. He really popped under people's radars in double A Tennessee, but he was still older than league average. So I'm not saying that he didn't perform well. I don't want bash to be used as an example of like, oh, he actually didn't perform well. That's not what that's not what this is because he still performed well. A non-prospect guy is John Hicks, who spent the entire year in AAA last year. And he put up really good numbers. Like John Hicks, as a veteran catcher, he put up like a slugging of like 530 or something. He put up really good numbers, but he has one of the lowest bash scores in the entire system. I think he was at like a 79 where 100 is average because he was 33 years old. You know, so like I'm trying to use bash as kind of a predictive metric so you can say not necessarily that he had a bad year like John Hicks in Iowa last year, but can you really expect John Hicks to perform doing that at the major league level? Probably not. That's why he had a 79 bash, you know.
It's like taking into account age. So like so maybe it's obvious, but age matters because of the curve that these guys progress on. So like, of course, if someone is more physically mature, like Jake Slaughter at 25 years old in high A and double A versus a pitcher who, you know, what's probably the average age at double A, like 23 about like
23, 24.
Yeah. So like if he's got that maturity already and the years of experience that you're calculating into that as well, like, of course, his numbers are going to be a little bit better because he's already kind of become the product. You could assume that he's already kind of become the product that he's going to be. Now, the one thing that I think about, and like, this would be curious, like if you were to, this is getting us off track here, but if you were to apply this to the major leagues, I wonder if it would work kind of inversely as players get older. It would like if they perform well at an older age, if their number would then be, if their bash would be higher, Because like think about like Verlander and Scherzer doing what they're doing. And obviously, it's not offensive, but like I can't think of an offensive guy right now. But like think about how people talk about like the twitch kind of wears off, or like the bat speed slows down, whatever. It's not really like
honestly
what we're going to talk about.
I hadn't
here,
thought about that though. Like I don't think. I think we might get into this a little bit, but I think this couldn't be used at the major league level. I don't think it can be used in that way, this stat. And when I was going through and working on this all off season, something you'll see when you go check out the article on Northside Bound, it has the leaderboard there. I included everybody on the leaderboard, as long as you had, I think 50 plate appearances in full season ball is, I think, the cutoff that I gave. I did not include Christopher Morel, Nelson Velasquez, anybody else that was that made their major league, that made any appearance in major league games, because I just didn't know how to take that into account quite yet. So I don't think this is something that can be extrapolated to the major league level, and I don't know that I would ever want it to be.
Yeah, I had the question, like, is this scalable to the entirety of the minor leagues?
Yeah. I mean, I have not done that.
I mean, for what you're doing, it doesn't make sense to take the time to do that. But
well, and that's the thing, is it would be really time consuming, and not only could that be used throughout all of minor league baseball, perfectly fine, but I think I know that it can also be used historically, right? So we can go back and look in past years. And that is ultimately my next big move with this, because I've tinkered with some of older players, because I wanted to make sure that I wasn't providing a metric that is just like completely unusable historically. So I've referenced past players here and there, but I would love, that's my next big move, is to go back and look at past Cubs farm systems in their entirety, and like see what Javi Baez, as he was coming up through the system, and see how that compares to like, or like a good example would be like Anthony Rizzo, once he came over and was in the Cubs farm system for that short amount of time that he was, compared to Brian LaHair when he was in the farm system, right? And so we saw how they ended up performing at the major league level. It's like, okay, what did like their BASH score actually tell us about how they would play as major league players? I think those two guys, I have not run those two guys compared to each other, but I think that would be a really good example of like, let's take a look at BASH and see how that compares for their future. And I think a prime example, Brian LaHair was an older guy playing at AAA. So I think that would be the first knock that he had. Not that this stat is entirely reliant on age, but that's a contributing factor to this, obviously.
Yeah, that'd be really interesting to see those reference points. And I think like being able to compare it to it, like it could temper the expectations of the expectations of a Matt Mervis, which there's been a ton of Matt Mervis talk. I don't want, like, just in general, like the entire nation, baseball nation, is talking about Matt Mervis. So I don't want to spend too much time on him, because I think that there's been a lot talked about with him, but it could temper expectations, right? I'd be really curious to see how his numbers would compare to LaHair or Rizzo.
Yeah, that's a good point. I know that, like, in terms of WRC plus and in terms of like your typical offensive production, like Matt Mervis ranked lower according to BASH than some of the other metrics. And PCA was the leader in terms of BASH in the system last year. Kevin Alcantara was second. Other people that stood out, James Triantos was top 5 in the system. Or I think he was ranked 6th, I think, actually, behind, if you're including Moises Ballesteros, who was in there with only like 158 plate appearances or something like that. So, James Triantos was up there in the top 10. Another guy that really stood out to me was Ethan Hearn, who was a top 10 offensive performer.
I know you've been on Hearn for a long time.
I was glad to see him, and I made the joke, right? I think I was making the joke to Brian or somebody that I catered the stat so that I could prop up James Triantos a little bit more. But like, really, like I was plugging in numbers, I was editing things here and there, but like to make it make sense for like how we value hitters, not necessarily because I love James Triantos. But I was excited to see Ethan Hearn kind of land his way in the top 10 there, because I think that what he did last year, especially as a catcher, was just this stat does not account for like positional value, but like the fact that he did that offensive production in Myrtle Beach as a catcher, still a young guy. And the other thing that BASH takes into account, I'll kind of end with this, is that I take into account stolen bases and caught stealings, which is something that I think should be valued more for offensive production. You know, I mean, I know that you start by doing that. You're not talking about like what they're doing as hitters anymore. Obviously, you're all offensive production. I haven't taken like other base running, like going first to third and stuff like that. That's more difficult. Honestly, it's difficult. I'm not quite there yet, but like if a guy singles and is more likely to steal second base, like that has value rather than a guy singling and then just being stuck there because he's a slow runner. You know what I mean?
Totally. Yeah. Really quick. So I know we talked before, right? When I was messaging you about this, we talked about a half hour. We're already at 25 minutes. Are you cool going a little over that? Like,
I'm perfectly fine with it. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Mitch said 30 to 35 minutes. I was like, that's going to be tough for us to stay within.
I can go all night, man.
Okay, cool. And hey, you know, we can, if Mitch, if you're watching this and you want something cut out, like feel free to cut anything out and cut it down if you need to. So obviously like reading through the Bash stuff, and this is kind of the last thing that I want to ask, and I think it'll lead into the further conversations that I want to have here. What stood out? Like, what was the biggest surprise to you? I mean, for me, like Hayden McGeary, honestly, that's a name that I've never even heard before. So for him to end up, what I'm looking at the list here, at 6, like he was a 3rd round draft pick out of a Colorado JUCO, I think, or like
he was further down than that. I'd have to look. I don't have it off the top of my head. He wasn't a 3rd rounder. He was lower in the draft than that. But yeah, you're right. D2 school in Colorado, and he just like he was 2-time National Player of the Year at the D2 level. Like put up
15th round. Yeah, I was gonna say
put up legitimately some of the funniest stats I've ever seen in my entire life. Like just absolutely absurd numbers. Now, granted, he was doing that in Colorado at altitude, at the D2 level, but like the dude can bash, no pun intended. Him landing at where he did on the list. Now, granted, not in as many at bats or plate appearances as you'd like to see, but like he was just drafted last year, so he wasn't able to get a full season in. He's a guy like Matt Mervis that he's going to have to absolutely rake because he doesn't. I've been getting heat for saying this. Where like a first baseman. I know McGeary is a catcher technically, but like first basemen don't bring defensive value, and like I've been catching heat all offseason for saying that, and I don't. It's not a difficult concept to grasp. I feel like we're like even if a guy is strong defensively at first base, like you're not bringing a whole bunch of value. Like the value comes from like playing an up the middle position very well, or playing all over the diamond like a guy like Chris Morrell, something like that. Hayden McGeary and Matt Mervis have to hit. Like we need to see Matt Mervis at the big league level hit like 120 WRC plus to bring value, because his WAR, like when you're looking at WAR, it's not going to be propped up by any defensive metrics, you know? Yeah. So it's not like, that's not a knock on Mervis. It's not a knock on Hayden McGeary. It's just like, that's just kind of how it is, you know, as far as first basemen go. They have to hit really, really well. And I think they both can. I think both guys can hit really well. I think Mervis can do it at the big league level. I have confidence in that. I don't want to keep taking heat for saying that defensive value is like important for prospect rankings and stuff, you know?
No, I mean, it makes sense. It makes sense to me. Obviously, I mean, you know, I follow baseball closely. It makes sense. I think one thing that you guys talked about on the episode I mentioned with Zumac, you talked about, I'm losing my train of thought here now. Either you guys talked about, or it was on one of the other like million baseball podcasts I listen to. this idea that like first base has kind of become a position that's relatively easy to fill. Yeah. Like if you've got a guy that can mash and like is willing to learn how to pick, you know, errant throws, like yeah. There's a lot more that goes into it defensively, like with alignments on cutoffs and everything like that. But that's the other thing. Like Cubs fans getting so invested in Mervis to me is like a vestige of them loving Rizzo and wanting like a replacement in their hearts for Rizzo. Yeah. And like, I don't want people to get too into that, because it's like, we could have, like, we have a plethora of shortstop prospects at different levels. And like any one of those guys at you know, any summer here, the farm system could say like, hey, you know what? Actually, we want you taking reps at first base because you're filling out a little bit more. You've got a bat. Like, yes, you can still field, but you don't have the range that you like. First base is kind of like,
yeah. I mean, like go back and look at like other like past MLB Pipeline top 10 first baseman lists, right?
Yeah.
If you go back and look at those, like you're getting maybe 2 on average that end up being like quality big league players.
Yeah.
You'll get a Pete Alonso every once in a while. You'll get a Freddie Freeman. You'll get guys like that. But to bank on like 7 of the top 10 first base prospects in Major League Baseball producing all-star caliber like at the big league level is not likely. And I feel bad, right? Like I hope that Matt Mervis isn't listening to me on podcast and saying like Greg hates me. Like I'm just down on Matt Mervis. It's like I also like part of like I feel like my responsibility to a certain degree is to like make sure fans' expectations of certain players is not sky high. So that if Matt Mervis comes up and like produces a 105 WRC plus in his rookie year, fans aren't like, oh, he's a bust. You know what I mean? Like that's so important to me that like because I spend all my time like hyping these guys up, but at the same time, I need to make sure that like fans have the right expectations. I know I don't carry that much weight with what I say, but like I just don't want like I don't want fans' perceptions of players to be ruined by a rough year or something like that. You know what I mean? Like I want guys to be continuing to be excited for these players.
Totally. Yeah, I agree. And I'm always happy to play that role on dingers too. Like, you know, hey, let's not get too high on that one game or, you know, the one season, because I mean, like looking league wide, I have a specific example in mind, but like how many guys have we seen have like one minor league season totally like just explode like off the charts, and then they get to the show and they just like never really produce. Like the name in my mind, I think the jury's still out because like he's still only 25 years old and he does have talent. He's got the pedigree, but like look at a guy like Gavin Lux. I think it was 2019. He just had like an insane season and he just like skyrocketed to the top of prospect lists. And then when he debuted, I think he debuted in the shortened season, like the expectations were sky high. And it's like it's funny you say like you don't want Mervis to like hear you talking. Like you're not the only one. Like there are national writers and podcasters and hosts and whatever talking about Matt Mervis and also doing the same thing that we're doing right now.
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, I mean, hey, if he ends up being a dude, awesome. Like
I want that to happen. I can't root for that.
Every one of these guys to be dudes, right? I mean, I guess that like that kind of to kind of put Mervis aside for a second. Like obviously he was the big breakout hitter last year. Do you have someone that you've got eyes on right now, whether it's from Bash or you know anything you've seen maybe in the offseason? Like who's a hitter that you think could skyrocket this season or maybe make their way? I don't want to like put like a specific thing, like who's going to be on Cubs fans' radars by the end of the season, do you think?
Actually, a guy that I've already talked about a little bit here today, James Triantos is that guy for me going into this year. Obviously, he scored well on Bash, so that helps. But I think the big thing with Triantos is like he was remarkably consistent throughout his age 19 season in Myrtle Beach last year. And he proved that he can make contact with just about any pitch that he wants to. And I think that now going into 2023 season, I think the big thing is making sure that he knows he doesn't have to make contact with every pitch that's thrown his way. He can be more selective. He's going to get out of that ballpark down in Myrtle Beach. He's going to get up to South Bend. He can hit for some more power, which is awesome because I think he has the body to do so.
Yeah.
I just think at the plate he could really, really take off this year. James Triantos could. I think the way his plate discipline, all that like it is. I think the plate discipline is the way that he really improves, and because he has that confidence that he can make not only contact. It's not even like an Albert Almora thing, right? Where Albert Almora was making contact with everything, but it was like crappy contact, right? It was like let me dribble the ball over to third base and like try to beat it out. James Triantos is making like pretty decent contact against all these different pitches, but it's like you don't have to, man. Like just like hunt for your fastball, hunt for a cement mixer slider, and like do damage to that pitch. And so because like the strikeout rate was very low for him last year. I think James Triantos could be that breakout for sure. And I'm a believer in the defense at third base still.
I was going to ask, where you think he sticks defensively?
Yeah, I think third base is probably the move. He played, I think almost every single inning was at third base last year for Triantos. Okay. He might have gotten something else over at second base or shortstop, but I think he was almost every single inning at third base. And so I saw somewhere in one of the chats for like the national writers about him having to move over to first base, and I don't see that. I mean, maybe ultimately, but I really believe he was rough. It was a little rough for him at third base last year, but like he has the movements that make you believe in it. You know what I mean?
Okay.
It's not like he was booting balls that were hit like right to him. Like he was just he has some work to do, but I don't think he's not a first baseman come 2024, or 2025. So James Triantos is my pick to break out in 23.
Yeah, I like that pick. I can't. I mean, you've got better statistical idea. Like, well, you know what? We have a true and false section, so I'm going to jump around here because this kind of like, I don't know if he's my pick to have an offensive breakout, but I'll make a statement and then you tell me whether you think it's true or false.
Love it.
Ed Howard has an offensive breakout in 2023.
And
we'll say relative to what expectations are for him.
I think he does. Ed Howard, it's super hard. I've got to hedge my bets on. I told you before, I'm going to hedge my bets on some of these, but with Ed Howard, it's hard, man. I know we've heard reports that he's going to be assigned to an affiliate right out of spring training, which is awesome. Yeah, but he still had a really bad hip injury. Like that was brutal. So like there's always that caveat that like the explosiveness and the smooth, the silky smoothness that we get with Ed Howard like has to return. He was looking pretty decent at the plate. I know like the numbers aren't like super indicative of the performance from him last year in a very small sample size, but like he looked a lot better at the plate. Like he was spitting on some sliders, which he was not doing the year before. He just looked more comfortable up there, which was great. So I think
like that was coming like right before it was like, oh, he's getting into his groove, and then the injury happened. It's like shit.
Yeah, I think relative to expectations, relative to where he's been at before, I could see an offensive breakout from Ed Howard in 23.
Another guy like at the major league level, we talked about him a little bit, and he's always on Cubs fans' minds based off the season that he had last year. I want to talk about Christopher Morel.
Yeah.
In your opinion, does he end up like an everyday dude, or is he kind of like a glue guy that plays the utility role? Like what do you think his ceiling is? Because I am so torn. I really can't pin it down.
Yeah, I think if he is the Cubs' everyday third baseman, then the Chicago Cubs are not good enough. And that's and I say that because I think he brings so much value as being versatile. Like him playing third base, him filling in at shortstop if you need him to, but him playing second base, him playing any outfield spot you want him to, like, that's where his value, like he is explosive in every way, shape, or form, right? Like he's putting up great exit velo numbers. When he's making contact, he's barreling the ball a lot. He's got the strong arm, like he's an explosive player. But I think that like so much of his value comes from, and I think it's not even like a situation where he plays all those positions if need be. It's like I think he logs damn near like a starting third baseman amount of at bats.
Yeah.
Just not manning third base only. You know what I mean? Yeah. I think you're not taking full advantage of like who he is as a player if he's your everyday third baseman. Instead, go out and find or like whether it's a prospect coming up, probably not that at third base, but like go out and sign a free agent. Manny Machado may or may not hit whoever it may be, find your third baseman and allow Christopher Morel to be the utility man and bring value that way.
Yeah. Talking to Ron Luce, we went live a few Fridays ago, and he's on Matt Chapman for third base. And like, it depends on what kind of offensive season that he has this year.
Mm-hmm.
He's up in Toronto still. Yeah. And
yep.
But like, hey, if we're focusing on defense on the infield, like it doesn't get. I mean, it's Key Brian Hayes. Probably he's number one right now defensively at third base. Believe it or not. Then Arenado and Chapman. It's like that's like great company to be in. But
I mean, picture Chapman and Dansby and Nico across the infield. Woo!
Dude, nothing's getting through there. And obviously, like it's been talked about, but like the shift banning rules, like that obviously makes it more important to have that defense, that infield defense. But no, I like what you said about Morel. Basically, like, correct me if I'm wrong, but we're not getting the most value out of him if we just stick him at third base and leave him there. That's kind of what you're saying.
Yeah, and I think that because it's twofold, right? You're not getting the full value out of him, but also if he's at third base, and that means you don't have a good third base. Like you don't have like a good high quality third baseman. You know, because I think Morel can be that. But like, guess what? You can also use him in a different role and get a good third baseman. Like you can have both. I promise.
Yes.
You know, like
versatility is important as we've come to learn in this era of Cubs baseball.
Early Jimmy Nelligan, when we were on Growing Cubs show, Jimmy Nelligan described Christopher Morel as like he thinks he can have like a Chris Taylor role.
And that's Fangraphs. Fangraphs, like that's the write up on Fangraphs when he debuted last year, like that. And it's like, if you could have a Chris Taylor, and he's Morel's 24. He's going to be 24 this season, I think.
Yeah, he's young. I think 24 going into this season, I think. He's young.
So like,
he's young.
If you've got a guy that young that can play a Chris Taylor role, and if fans don't, Chris Taylor, the Dodgers kind of utility man, like primarily center field, but can play short and second as well. But that'd be fantastic. I want to do one more question, and then we'll end with some true or false. Assuming, I think there's like an obvious answer here, but I wonder if you have any other thoughts. Assuming Kyle Hendricks isn't healthy for opening day, who starts the season as the fifth starter?
All right, so we got Stroman and Tyone and Steele locked in. Likely Smiley is the 4. And then so I think it comes down between two guys, right? I think it's you're deciding between what roles you want Hayden Wesneski and Adrian Sampson to play. I think that's what it comes down to ultimately. And that I think at this point it really is a toss. It's entirely dependent on the way the Cubs want to like utilize those two arms. I would be shocked, assuming everybody's healthy, that is the way the roster is set. Right. I think that it truly is like a 50-50 shot on Sampson versus Wesneski. The Cubs, I have beat the drum hard in that we should praise the Cubs for the way they've handled starting pitchers coming up through the system the past few years, because several years ago I was equally beating the drum just as hard about how awful they were handling starting pitchers. So I've tried to play both roles here. They've gotten so good, so good about, hey, if a pitching prospect is good enough to play at the major league level, guess what? He is on that major league roster. Like he may be as a reliever and then converted to the bullpen or to the rotation, like a Justin Steele. But they're playing their best. They're throwing their best pitchers, no matter what the role is. And I feel pretty confident that Hayden Wesneski can fill a role of throwing multiple innings out of the bullpen at a time, and then eventually converting back to the rotation. And in years past, like 4 or 5 years ago, they weren't doing that, right? They were saying, all right, a guy needs to come up and be in the rotation if he's a starter. I just feel so much better about like the fluidity of the pitching prospects and the way they handle the pitching rotation too. So I guess I said it's 50-50. If I'm choosing one of those two, and you can go back and clip me on this video when I'm wrong. I'm going to say I'll go with Sampson getting that number 5 spot. I think
it's the boring answer, but I agree.
It feels like they can get more value out of Wesneski in the bullpen multiple innings and Sampson eating innings rather than the other way around. I don't think that Sampson can be nearly as good in that multi-inning relief role.
That's a good point. Yeah.
I think you just have more value doing that probably.
Yeah. And that's not to say that Wesneski won't get starts.
Yeah, because he will
if it works out that way. Of course he will. But I think that's a really good way to think about it. So let's wrap up with some true or false. First statement here. Christian Hernandez begins to realize his potential in 2023.
True, but again, caveat, but we have to realize that like those expectations that were being thrown on Christian Hernandez after he got
ridiculous.
signed were absurd, dude. Like
they
were they were so ridiculous. It's almost like comical to look back on that. You throw comps on players and you're throwing like and I'm very careful about comps and making sure that people take them as like he plays this way. He is not this player. But like they were like legitimately saying, oh, like this guy's A-Rod, this guy's Manny Machado. Like not even the comps. Like they were saying like this is what he should be. It's like what are you talking about? So yeah, I mean I think this year we see him in low A in Myrtle Beach. I'm guessing we'd probably see him start off the year on that roster, starting off as the starting shortstop on that team. And I'm just not putting really a whole lot of stock into what he did in Arizona last year.
No, agreed.
First year, like time stateside. That's a lot to take in as a young kid. I think he starts to realize some of that potential. But a realistic potential, not the ridiculous potential.
Yeah, it's the same as how people were hyping up Jason Dominguez for the Yankees as being like the next Mike Trout, like switch hitter. I think like switch hitting Mike Trout. Like this dude's gonna. Yeah, so I agree. Here's a contentious one.
All right,
Brennan Davis's future is with another organization.
False. Absolutely false. You'll know I am still the only person still on the Brennan Davis is the number one prospect in the farm system right now. I still have him ranked number one. Is that partially because I'm stubborn? Absolutely, it's partially because I'm stubborn. But I think that Brennan bounces back in a big way this year. I think we see him in Chicago, and I think that he's kind of here to stay. Also, something that goes into my false he will be with another team statement is that at this point, he has a whole lot more value to the Chicago Cubs, knowing the kind of guy he is and knowing like how hard he's working. That doesn't mean anything to other teams when they're trading for him. Like that, they want to see what he's done on the field. In the past couple of years, he's been injured, right? So, I think he doesn't have nearly as like we talk about during the trade-off years, the past couple of years. We were talking about how much more value that like to Cubs fans and the Cubs front office that Anthony Rizzo had than he had to other teams and trades.
Yep.
And I think that Brennan Davis right now is a really good example of that. We're like, if the Cubs still believing in him, assuming they do, then that value lies within the Cubs organization, not in another organization. So I'm big believer on Brennan Davis moving forward, and I think that he will be with the Cubs long term.
Okay. Yeah, I'm reading the Cubs way right now, finally, however many years later. And they talk about like the character of the players. And I think that's really, you talked about talking to Roederer and Wicks and like talking to these guys and watching the interview, like you feel that that's definitely still in the organization. And it's probably because of Jed being the president now, but it is interesting. And Brennan Davis is, I think you guys talked about this. Brennan Davis is kind of like the Chris Bryant right now, where like he's handling the media and the pressure super well.
Dude. Yeah.
Another guy that this is the guy that I'm stubborn about, and I think you are too. True or false? Cole Franklin creates top 100 buzz.
I have to say false, but I don't want to say false because I really like the stuff that Cole Franklin has. I think right now he's so far off from the top 100 based on like he hasn't produced any type of results in full season ball yet.
Right.
And that's because of a multitude of reasons, obviously. Look back at the numbers from last year. Don't bother looking back at the numbers because they don't really matter. Like go back and watch his outings because like he would look really, really good and then just like fall apart. And like it was because there was no consistent, like he was still learning how to pitch in full season baseball, but the reason why I say false is because right now, like he's so far off that top 100 that even if he can come out next year in South Bend or Tennessee and dominate for the first half of the season, and he still won't sniff a top 100. If he dominates for a full season, we're getting a little closer, obviously. But I think he would have to come out with like an ERA close to 2 this entire year in order to sniff a top 100 list. So
Yeah.
I'm a believer in the fastball. The mid-90s fastball is still very good. The changeup, I've always been a huge believer in Cole Franklin's changeup. I think it's really solid. And a lot of times last year, he was using that changeup as like he needed a strike. Like he was throwing that changeup. And then he's developing this offseason, he developed a new slider that he can use next year. So he's got a true 4-pitch mix with a fastball, changeup, slider, curveball. I think all the stuff, assuming that he comes out with a slider that's as good as his other stuff, he's got a nasty repertoire, and I think I'm excited for his 23 season.
Yeah, I'm very excited to see like a full healthy season, and the some of the footage of his curveball last season that was just filthy.
Nasty,
yeah. So the arm that I think always kind of like they kind of are like a two for Ryan Jensen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
True or false? Ryan Jensen's future is in the bullpen.
I'd say yes. I'll say true. This is a tough one though, man. Like he has nasty stuff, and I have somewhere along the line I flipped into like the biggest Ryan Jensen believer of all the Cubs prospect writers. I don't know how that happened, but it happened apparently. He's got nasty stuff. He came back last year with a new arm slot, or not arm slot, but he was throwing closer to his ear.
Yeah. Shortened arm motion.
Long arm swing before that.
Yeah.
And he's shortened it even a little bit more since last offseason or since last season. So he is very clearly willing to take to coaching. The fastball is good, the slider is good, the cutter is good, the curveball is good. Like he has good stuff. So really, his problem the past couple of years has been he is leaking pitches either in the heart of the plate or missing by a lot. And so those edges of the zone are not getting eaten up as much as they should. And so my thinking is that if he can't hit the edges of the zone more moving forward, then he's not even really a reliever. You know, like he doesn't have like the 102 mile an hour consistent fastball. Like the stuff is nasty, but it's not like nasty enough that he can be doing what he's been doing and still make it work in the bullpen. So the reason why I'm hesitant to say bullpen and think he can maybe as a starter is because like if he's anything, he might be a starter, you know. He's a really good example of a guy that because he's on the 40-man roster now, we might see him make it up to the bigs as a reliever and gone the Justin Steele route of converting him to the back to the rotation at some point.
Yeah, I would be surprised if we didn't see him in the bullpen at some point. Like it would have to go pretty wrong, because I think regardless of his numbers that he puts up in the minors this season, I think they're going to want to see him at the major league level just to know for sure. So again, I'd love to see him stick in the rotation. I think the points about his command are like, I think that's good stuff. And that's what you get from watching him pitch, from watching the game.
And I'll say too, that like a big thing with Ryan Jensen is that I think that he will start the year in the Tennessee rotation.
Okay.
And that Tennessee rotation is going to be, assuming it is what we expect it to be in terms of like who's there, everybody's healthy, all that good stuff. To start off the year is going to be stupid good. Like insane. And Ryan Jensen, we're going to see Luis Devers there. We're going to see Daniel Palencia there. We're going to see Ben Brown might start the year there. I'm missing a couple guys. I don't have
Wicks and Hers probably.
Yeah, Wicks and Hers. Yep, thank you. Wicks and Hers are probably there. It's just a stacked rotation. I'm really excited.
It's going to be nuts.
Yeah.
I got a few more here, but since we're talking about pitching, I think this one we can make quick work of. Caleb Killian regains his form and makes an impact in the MLB rotation in 2023.
I don't know that I can. I don't know that I can answer this one. I'll say false.
Yeah, I agree, unfortunately.
But I'm really concerned about him not missing bats. I know that like there was a lot of concerns last year about, obviously he came out to the bigs and was like all over the place, missing the zone. But I'm way more concerned about him not missing bats than him missing the zone. The stuff is just not generating swings and misses. It was one of the lowest swing strike rates in the entire system last year. So I'm worried about that. I just think he has a lot of work to do to get back there.
Yeah. last pitching one, and then we've got two other ones. I think I know the answer to this one already, but Ben Brown ends the season as the Cubs' best pitching prospect.
I'm going false on that, although I loved Ben Brown. I loved Ben Brown this past year. Like I think the numbers that he put up, like people don't even realize how good of numbers he put up last year. Some like between the Cubs and the Phillies system, like some of the best numbers in the entire farm system for the Cubs. But I think you said by this time next year, is that what you said? Or by the end of the year?
Well, yeah. I mean, we'll say this time next year. Yeah.
I mean, same thing, I guess. I think by that point, Jordan Wicks will not have I think he'll still be a prospect at that point. And I'm high on Jordan Wicks. I think that Daniel Palencia this year, dude. I am so damn excited for Daniel.
I'm gonna get MILB TV just to tune into Palencia starts. Like you sold me on watching Palencia.
Yeah, man. I think that I would not be surprised. All right, wait, hold on. I'm preparing myself before I make this hot take. If Pete Crow Armstrong has exhausted his rookie eligibility this year, which I don't know that he will. We might get into that. If he does for some reason, I think no, I'll take it back. I'm not going to say it. Daniel Palencia he has a really good shot of being the top pitching prospect in the Cubs system at the end of this year. And I think he has a chance of being a top 75 prospect in all of baseball going into next season. So I was trying to get it to say the top prospect in the Cubs system. I'm not quite.
I know. I saw you inching closer. So So this one I think is kind of a gimme. So I'll kind of gloss over it. But Miguel Amaya makes his MLB debut in 2023. I hope that's true. It would have to be pretty bad. Like it'd have to be like another brutal injury if he doesn't, right?
Yeah, I think that he will. I think he will because I think he starts off the season in AAA. I think that now that the Cubs went and signed Dom Nunez and signed another catcher. Luis Torrens, I think.
Yeah, Torrens. Yeah.
And so I think that that's a perfect situation for Miguel Amaya to be in AAA with those three, like a three catcher system. I think he does make it up to the bigs this year. I'm excited. I'm excited for a healthy season from Miggy, man. It should be good.
Me too. So final one here, and I got to place the right emphasis. True or false? Pete Crow Armstrong does not make his MLB debut in 2023.
I'm saying that is false. I think he will. I guess what I'm saying is I think he will make his MLB debut.
Yeah, I made a double negative there.
No, but you're good.
The controversial statement is that he doesn't, which I actually think he'll probably get a September call up, right? But we're not going to see him like pre-deadline. No.
I think that. So I mean, such a big thing is, are the Cubs competing in the second half of the year?
Yeah.
If they're competing for a playoff spot, I think it's way more likely we see PCA. If they're out of it entirely and selling off the deadline, well, like the thing is, they really don't have a whole lot of pieces to sell off the deadline. That actually hurts PCA, right? Because like if they did have a whole bunch of pieces they could sell off, then I think there's more roster space available for PCA. But if they're not competing and they're not able to really sell off many pieces, then PCA is in the minors, and I think that's perfectly fine. Like he's still a young, like super young, getting his first taste of it is going to be a challenge, right? He's getting his first taste of the upper levels of the minors. That transition to AA is not easy, man. So, but it also cracks me up that people are like, oh, my hot take is that he makes his MLB debut. It's like, yeah, he's a top prospect in the system, according to most people, and he's in AA. Like, of course he has a chance of making his big league debut. So like, it's not, I'm gonna stifle some of those hot takes, quote unquote hot takes, that he makes his MLB debut. I think there's a really good possibility that happens.
Yeah. It's the same as where Brennan Davis was last year, pre-injury essentially, where it's like, Davis obviously further along, where like we expected him to be a bigger contributor.
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree. That's a lukewarm take that PCA
exactly.
Yeah. Greg, this has been awesome, man. We could go another hour, but we're like double the time that Mitch told me to go. But this has been great, dude. I've wanted to talk to you for a long time. It feels like we've been talking because of Twitter, and I hear your voice on podcasts, every other week. Let's sign off that way. What's the cadence going to look like for Cubs on Deck this year, and what can people expect from Northside Bound?
Yeah, so as far as Cubs on Deck, we are still, as of this episode dropping here, we're still every other week as of right now, but that's a quick change because come March, we will be back to every Tuesday episodes dropping. I will get throughout March, I'm getting the minor league broadcasters as my co-host for those shows. So we're going to preview all 4 affiliates heading into the season. I'll get Alex Cohen from Iowa. I'll get Brendan King and Max Toma from South Bend. And then I will get Sam Wiederhalf from Myrtle Beach on the show as my co-host. That should be a whole lot of fun. So every Tuesday, go check out the show. And as far as Northside Bound, we're really excited to come back for another season. Plenty of good content coming your way. I've this offseason, I haven't produced as much written content because I've been on the podcast and YouTube game. But plenty of written content. Todd Johnson does a phenomenal job covering all the farm system on a daily basis over at Northside Bound. So I've got podcasts every Tuesday. I've got written articles every single day on Northside Bound. If it's not from me, it's from somebody else. And then I've been trying to get the YouTube channel for Northside Bound off the ground a little bit, so you can see some other video content over at Northside Bound on YouTube. So yeah,
right on. And folks can follow you on Twitter at
Out of the Vines on Twitter.
Right on. Greg, thanks so much, man. Go Cubs.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks, Jake.
There we go. I had it full screen.